And we will probably also record the Q&A as well. But if you don't want your question recorded, send me a quick message before and we can turn it off for your question too. Okay, without much further ado, I'm going to let her introduce herself as well, but I'm going to hand over now to Jess from the BRC.
Hi everyone, thank you all so much for having me. I'm just going to quickly share my slides. Is everybody able to see that? Fab. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Jess. I'm the Patient and Public Engagement Manager at the Guy's and St Thomas's Research and Development Department. And today I'm going to be talking to you about methods that I've used to engage the public with arts and craft. So just to start off, I'll really briefly whiz over what public engagement is. Some of you may or may not know, but essentially the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement describes it as the myriad of ways in which the activity and benefits of higher education and research can be shared with the public, and that it should be a two-way process involving interaction and listening with the goal of generating mutual benefit. So just a couple of examples on the right here of how researchers and publics can both benefit from engagement activities. So in a research setting, researchers can get feedback, new ideas from having conversations with the public, and also ensure that what they're doing is relevant for the audiences that they are interested in. And from the public side, they get the chance to contribute to that conversation and the direction of that research and have some ownership of that as well. And of course, it's really skills building to do public engagement for both sides, get really good communication skills, networking with new people that you wouldn't have before, gaining new knowledge on both sides, and potentially on both sides having experience of managing certain projects, and just, getting new experiences in general, which is always a positive thing. And we all know how important impact is in terms of research. So by engaging with the public, you can, raise the profile of your research, of your work and your work group, reach wider audiences, and ensure that you are making a difference for the research that you're involved in. And from the public side, they're impacted by being informed and involved in this research process. And hopefully it means that societal needs get met by having their voices heard. And of course, it's a fun experience for all. So why should we be doing engagement? For accountability, a lot of research is publicly funded. So we have a duty to inform the public what we are doing with that funding. And we want to make sure that it is relevant to the public as well, and to patients, and make sure that the research is responding to what is needed. Trust is really, really important as researchers, scientists and medical field, which is pretty poignant at the moment with the pandemic and the misinformation of vaccinations and other healthcare practices. We need to be responsive to the need of public and patients as well. And on a more superficial level, it is required in a lot of funding bids as well to mention how you are going to be engaging with the public. So it's something that you need to really think about from the early stages of research, especially when feeding back into research excellence framework and knowledge exchange framework as well. So just a little diagram here of when you are planning public engagement, you have to make sure you have a clear purpose of why you want to engage, and specifically who you want to engage with. And then, you can develop the process of what you want to do to be able to achieve that. And evaluation throughout the whole process is really key to measure whether what you're doing is successful, how you can improve it, and what impact that it is having. So just some examples of types of public engagement. There's just so many different ways to do it. I think the one that people mainly think about is outreach. So that's working with schools, doing workshops, mentoring. Patient involvement is another common one, specifically in healthcare setting, consulting with patient panels, and ensuring that they're aware and can help shape the research direction according to their experiences as a patient of that condition or research area. Collaborative research, so co-designing with members of the public or non-specialists. You can also do citizen science, which invites the public to do to analyze data from research as well. We've got participatory arts, which is more what we're going to touch on today, and community engagement, so responding to a specific community need with your research through engagement. So on to the subject of the talk. So this is a couple of examples that I'm going to give you of working with artists or the participatory arts that I've just mentioned. So I'm not sure if you know of Science Gallery London, which is a gallery which is affiliated with King's College. Before my role at Guy's and St Thomas's, I was at King's College Stem Cells Centre. So a lot of these examples actually involve that, because that's where I developed the projects, and I'm now covering them still because in my role they are within the remit. So here we did an exhibition for Science Gallery London, an installation where one of our researchers grew skin cells in incubators that were powered by compost and bees as well, because they generate their own heat source. That was part of an exhibition that was exploring healing the human body. This example here was actually a science fiction play, and researchers teamed up with the director to make stem cell involvement in the play as kind of realistic as possible in a science fiction way. And then at the end of the performance, we had a public panel with the audience to ask about the real science behind it. Over lockdown, I partnered scientists with artists, and we created an online exhibition called Only Connect. The group was called Illuminations, but yeah, we created a half-an-hour video of some artwork that was created by pairings of 8 different artists and scientists, and that was really great fun. So today I'm going to focus more on 2 case studies which are all about crafting and creating. So the first one is the embroidery workshop, Stich and Stem, and essentially it used images of stem cells from the lab and translated them into embroidery templates. And the idea was to get people to learn about the research whilst also gaining a new skill, so that being the embroidery. We brought together publics and scientists in a relaxed and safe space to talk about stem cell research openly. And the original workshop setting, which was in person pre-pandemic, was that a researcher would give a talk, which was a kind of background to stem cell basic biology, followed by a more in-depth exploration into what their research was. And then I would give a demonstration on how to do the actual embroidery part, and we'd all come together, have a cup of tea, a slice of cake and a biscuit, and just chat about the science, which was really, really nice. So, sorry, my slides are stuck. Oh, there we go. It's probably going to jump forward 5 now. So here's some examples of some of the images that we translated. The idea of it actually came up because I really enjoy crafting myself. I do it at home, I do knitting, I do crochet and embroidery, and it's just a really nice, calming and enjoyable thing. So that's where the original idea came from. And so I put a call out to researchers across the centre and said, would you be interested in being part of this project? And then they sent lovely images. So we have a neuron that's been grown from embryonic stem cells, some skin cells grown in a dish looking at wound repair. And then we have this time lapse of a skin cell that was migrating over time. And I hired an illustrator to draw these images out in a more accessible way to translate it into an embroidery. So the kind of project I created as like a flagship project that all staff could get involved in, and it was a really easy way for people to get started in public engagement, because they they could just dip in and out, provide an image, and then join sessions when they could. And so it gave people experience to do some hands-on engagement work if they hadn't done it before, as I was the kind of creator or project manager of it, if that makes sense. It was really lovely and mobile, flexible activity. There's not very much equipment involved. We've taken it to a variety of settings. So we've had school visits, have a go at it. This was always a little bit of we weren't sure how students were going to respond to it, teenagers, but surprisingly, they really, really loved it and got stuck in. Like, look at these young guys were just so intrigued by the research images and recreating them. So it was just really lovely to see that kind of enthusiasm. We've also taken it to large-scale public events like this Guy's Cancer Centre Cancer Survivors Day. So we had a stand, and people, patients and other visitors just came, walked past, picked up an embroidery hoop, had a go and had a chat with us about the research that we're doing. I also teamed up with local community groups. So Team London Bridge was the example that I used, and they shared the event. So local people could come and join us, see the labs, and have a go at the session too. So yeah, it was really easy to kind of translate it to different settings. And it meant that we could reach new audiences, you know, people that maybe were interested in crafts but hadn't had an interest in science before, or people that hadn't done either and were learning new things in both settings. So yeah, it was just a really nice, relaxed environment and allowed people to learn and engage in a fun way. So obviously when the pandemic hit, it meant that we had to rethink how we would engage the public. And at first, I think one of the methods that we had was, let's create resources online that people can access from home. So I created the Stich and Stem embroidery kit that people could download. Here's a link to it if anybody would like to have a go. And it just basically mapped out what equipment you needed, what you needed to do, and gave them images, descriptions of what they were, and the templates that they could print or trace onto their embroidery project. We've also held it online. So again, similar setting where the researcher will describe the basics of stem cell biology and then go into more depth about their work, maybe have some quiz, Q&A specifically about their research whilst we do the actual embroidery element. So here, the setup I had is I had my phone on a tripod so that it was showing what my hands were doing, and then I had a camera on my face. So to kind of evaluate the outcomes of this project, the majority of the time we did a pre and post feedback questionnaire setting. And 100% of participants have said that they've learned something new from the experience, which is pretty amazing, whether that be the embroidery or the research content itself. Really, really high rate of visitor enjoyment, as particularly younger students, as I mentioned before. They really, really liked it because other kind of workshops they'd been doing weren't as kind of free and allowed them to chat amongst themselves and just enjoy it. And a couple of them had actually said that it was good for their mental health as well, which is really nice feedback to hear. So researchers that have involved their feedback that their skills had improved as well, and their ability to communicate their science with non-specialists. And also the impact on their research. By having these kind of conversations, it meant that they were able to really consider the meaning of what their research was and how that it referred to patients and conditions and how that would translate into the clinical setting as well. Kind of brought them back to the reason why that they were doing that as well. So to date, we've had about 1,500 members of the public have a go at the session in some way or form, which is a really great high number as well. So the second case study that I'm quickly going to run through with you is an online project that I did called Recreate Science. And this was, again, over the pandemic, working out ways to engage the public. from their own homes. And the artist collaboration that I mentioned earlier, we came up with this in one of our exhibition meetings, and how to get the public interacting with the content of the exhibition. So we put a call out on social media and asked people at home whilst they were, this was when everyone was full lockdown, not going to work, to send us in images of science, of these research images recreated, just using household objects to get them thinking about what the objects meant. And so our artist and scientist collaborators gave some examples and we shared those. And then in terms of carrying that activity forward, throughout the last 2 years, because we have been doing a lot of online engagement, we've asked young student groups to do this as one of their homework activities, which is so important as well, because everyone has been online for so long. Everyone has Zoom fatigue, looking at screens all the time. We wanted to give them something that's hands-on, that they can do in their own time, and not have to be looking at a screen all the time. So these are some the art science partnerships. We have a neuron here from Ayeva, and the same person from the Stich and Stem actually, and her artist partner recreated it with stick and some red thread. So it's all really basic objects that you can find at home. And then Anna Maria, another PhD student, was paired up with artist Maritina, and she recreated this pancreatic organoid using just balled up bits of paper and paint. And I'm just going to show you some examples that were either sent in via social media using the Recreate Science hashtag. You can go and have a look on social media for that hashtag and have a look as well for yourself. So this is more organoids sent by Anna Maria, and someone had sent in this really nice replication of it using water droplets based on a mirror to get all these different sized, lovely recreated organoids. This is a pancreatic duct with insulin producing cells tagged in green. And this is one of our summer school students that recreated it using Nerf gun pellets, lentils, and a bit of cabbage. And then finally, this is some skin cells that were grown in a dish, and you have the smaller cell types and the larger cell types. And this was recreated by another student by simply blowing paint through a straw, and you get these lovely different textures and different size cells that are really well replicated here. So that's the end of my presentation. Yeah, please do feel free to get in touch at any point if you have any questions. And then, Matt, would you like me to mention the funding links now or later on at the end?
Yeah, why not do your funding links now? And then,
Sure.
But I was going to say, we'll save, because there's questions already in the chat, but maybe we'll save all the questions for the end, and then, because you might both have answers for them, sort of stuff.
Fabulous. Okay, yeah. So just to give you some, sorry, that's a lot of text. I can copy that into the chat later, actually. But essentially, KCL specific funding, there's currently one that needs to go out really quickly. It's a participatory research funding. So anyone that's at KCL, have a look at that. There's a regular King's Artist Award. They give you a little bit of money to explore some relationships with artists. No pressure to create anything. And then if it is a successful kind of research and development exploration, they'll give you a bit more money to actually make an output with it. So that's quite a nice way to give you a little bit of an insight into what it's like to work with an artist. The Doctoral Training Centre has a small grant scheme of up to £1,000 that they run twice a year, normally in October and April. And then the Centre for Medical Engineering have a public engagement fund for up to £3,000, but that's specifically for their department. From GSTT, there is a charity fund which you can apply for, and that's all about improving healthcare and responding for communities, and how to improve well-being in that sense. So as long as your kind of research or activity ties in with that framework, you can apply for that. And then you have all these general societies. I won't go through them. I can just pop them in the chat. But these are open to anyone. Some of them you have to be a member of their society, but are not all of them. But yeah, no, that's me. So thank you all so much for listening. That it's really a pleasure to be here and share those case studies with you.
Thanks so much, Jess. That was a really great talk, and I'm really looking forward to the Q&A session. Yeah, because already lots of people got lots of interesting questions about your work. But Leigh, do you want to tell us all about the projects that you have done?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Jess. It was a beautiful presentation. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. Let's have a look. Matt, can you see that okay?
Yeah, looking great.
That's amazing. Great. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone, and it's so nice to see, so many people at this session. So I'm going to kind of continue on from what Jess has been talking about from a slightly different angle. And I am the Public Engagement Coordinator for the MRC Centre for Developmental Neurobiology and Neurodisorders and the Centre for Developmental Neurobiology. So we look at researchers in these two centres, look at how the brain develops and also what happens at the molecular basis in neurodisorders such as autism, epilepsy and psychosis. Okay, sorry guys, just I've frozen for a second. See if I can do that. Okay, that's good. Okay, so for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk about one case study in a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to firebomb you with a few approaches that I've been taking and that researchers in the centre have been taking using creative approaches. And the things that I've decided to concentrate on for this session are really craft-based. So what do we mean when we say craft-based? I guess Jess did an absolutely beautiful introduction to it, but a definition that I found on the net is an activity involving skill in making things by hand. So the things that I'm going to be talking about today will be ways of engaging audiences with research and with scientific concept using craft-based engagement. So, okay, so to start things off, the first case study I'm going to talk about involves a researcher from the MRC Centre for Neurodevelopmental Disorders, Gemma Medinas, and her partnership with the installation artist and multimedia artist, Izzy Parker. And actually, these guys got one of the artist awards that Jess just mentioned there in her funding stream links. So, and Gemma's work concentrates on the role of neural mechanisms involved in the emotional aspects of psychotic symptoms and disorders, such as schizophrenia. So much of her work looks at model systems that involve dissecting out the cellular and molecular basis and genetic basis of schizophrenia and psychosis. So Gemma and Izzy got together with myself to devise a session that engaged with a group of Year 12 students online as part of my summer school. It's called Developmental Neurobiology Academy. And so what we thought would be really nice, it was online, I should say, because it was COVID times, this was last year. And we decided to go about exploring the subject of psychosis in a real stepwise way, leading participants through layer by layer, through to a creative approach. So I'll just talk you through a couple of those steps. So Gemma did an amazing presentation and interactive discussion session with the students, which there was about 55 students online. So she introduced her research, the kind of approaches she uses, the sort of insights that she was finding from her research. Then the lovely members of the Medinas Lab very bravely went into breakout rooms with the students and delved a little bit deeper into some of the aspects of that were related to psychosis and surrounding themes, I guess, from that they were working on as part of their research. So they went and spent 20 minutes with each set of the Year 12 students discussing each of these 4 things: so cannabis, psychosis, brain chemistry, and brain imaging. And these are all related to the research that the group members were doing. Okay, so having done this with the students, it was of great interest to really see what their responses were and how they were reacting to this research and what their feelings were on it. So this is where Izzy came into play. So Izzy really skillfully at this point introduced the idea of exploring emotions, which essentially was the basis of Gemma's research, and using silk clay, okay, and sculpture. So what she asked the students to do, and we sent them all out a little package each, containing some chocolate, some popping candy, some wasabi seaweed, and some rice cakes. And what she asked them to do was to taste each of these products and match them with one of these 4 emotions. So sadness, happiness, fear, I guess, scared, and angry. And using the skill and craft of sculpting to explore their responses as they were eating the food and also thinking about the emotions as they were sculpting. So we did this online. So Izzy was there talking us through how prompting and inspiring us with thoughts on how to interpret your feelings and how to display them in your sculptures. Okay, using shape and texture and also your senses, the smell and the taste of the foods and matching them all up. So I'm just going to show you now a few of those examples. So we basically asked them to take pictures of their sculptures and then upload them onto Padlets in real time. And so as they were doing this, we were able to discuss the responses. And this is the response to scared. And you don't need to take in all the stuff on these slides, but I really just want you to just take a look at the richness of these responses and also the colours as well, how they relate to each of the emotions. So that was scared. And this is angry, some really beautiful oranges and reds. And sadness. And happiness. I thought I'd end on happy. Some really, really beautiful responses. And I guess if I was to delve into any one of these Padlets, what was really amazing about this particular activity was how, the depth of interaction and expression really that came out from these sculptures. So you can see here, I've just picked 3 from 3 of the boards, and students were really exploring and connecting with the concepts of each of those emotions in a way that probably if we just asked them to talk about it may or may not have happened. So it was a really nice point of conversation and worked really well for instigating the conversation as we were making online. Something about as we were making that somehow made it easier for people to talk as well, a little bit like Jess was saying about her space. And it just invites participants to understand emotions through a slightly different lens and the research that's going on behind those emotions and how that relates to investigating neurodisorders such as psychosis or schizophrenia. Okay, what that rearrangement of emotions looks like in those disorders. Okay, and here's a lovely picture of us all at the end holding up one of our sculptures, some of the participants and the lab members who also joined in. They really enjoyed this session and just following on from what Jess was saying there about evaluation, this session was evaluated and got amazing feedback, and we gathered all of that information after the session. Okay, so the second part of what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about some of the range of approaches that I've used and that other researchers that I've been working with have used to explore neuroscience, if you like, and the brain and brain cells and neurons. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few of these in the hope that may inspire to adventure into this realm. Okay, once again, these are quite craft-based and making-based. So here are some pictures of some children that I worked with at a school in Bangalore, a community school. I worked with this group of children for a week, and we delved into neuroscience, and we were called the Neuroanatomy Explorers. And one of the activities we did with them quite early on was thinking about the neuron and the structure of the neuron and the anatomy. And we used pipe cleaners to recreate the neuron. And they absolutely loved this. As we were working through it, we were talking about the different parts of the neuron, the axon, the cell body, and the dendrites and the polarity of the cell. And it opened up many different conversations about the cell. And they were comparing and talking and chatting and exploring their ideas about brain cells. So once we'd made our beautiful neurons out of our pipe cleaners, then we drew a huge brain on the floor on some paper. And I'm not sure you can see it that well on this slide, but essentially it's a brain showing the functional regions of the brain. And we asked them, based on the conversations that we'd been having, to connect the nuclei in the brain using their neurons. So this was a really large scale interaction, and fully interactive throughout, looking at the connections and the function within the brain. So once we've done that, we moved on to talking about how neurons pass signals between themselves. So action potentials and electrical transmission of signal. And this was us setting up a race, a linear circuit, and the children sitting either side, and we used tennis balls to demonstrate how signals pass between neurons down a circuit. And we made it into races, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, so pipe cleaners are one way to explore neurons, but I've somehow ended up working a lot with pebbles. I love pebbles, and this is just pictures showing the materials that we used to build some pebble neurons. So this was a project down in Sidmouth with all of the year 4s in the Sidmouth area, so about 90 year 4 children, 8 to 9 year olds. And we asked them to go grab their pebbles, and once again, after some discussion and presentation about what a neuron structure is, we asked them to build their neurons. And this is them building their cell bodies and their dendrites, and we use saline rope, cut up bits of saline rope to do fine dendritic connections at the end. That's what the blue stuff is on these beautiful sculptures. And again, this is with a group of 10 neuroscientists, all from the centres that we work with. And again, we encourage them to go one step further, think about the connections between the neurons and the circuits. We moved outside the year after, and I guess the point from this slide is that use the natural environment. It's a really, fun, exciting place to be, the outside world. And this is the children building their absolutely huge neurons. And I think I've got a little movie here. I don't know if it'll work. Yeah, so just to give you an idea of the scale, they were a good 30, 40 feet and spread along the entire seafront of Sidmouth. And then we played games, and we had buckets of water to represent synaptic vesicle transmission between neurons. And the kids had an absolute ball and really understood the concepts that we were trying to share at the end. Okay, so the next thing I want to say, just related to that, is whilst we were engaging in building these neurons, we had, fair to say, a fairly large audience from the passers-by who were fascinated with what was going on. So it opened a door really to having conversations with those people. So we split forces. Some of the researchers went up and spoke to the people that were looking down onto the beach, and some of us stayed with the children. And it opened up the possibility of some really rich, interesting conversations. People wanting to know what they were researching, how they were looking at it, what their questions were, and also talking to the people that were walking by. It was amazing to hear what they would be interested to know and what their knowledge was about neuroscience. Okay, so just be open to unexpected audiences. Again, using pebbles, done some wonderful workshops, and this is some boys from Sunnydown School, a special school for boys with learning difficulties and who have autism spectrum disorder. And this was part of a longitudinal study, really, that we worked with the boys for 6 months, and this was one of the sessions, drawing beautiful neurons onto pebbles and really interpreting through the most colourful, beautiful ways of expressing their interpretations of what neurons are. Okay, a little bit similar to what Jess was describing about her Recreate project. We undertook an online international project with a group in America through the Society for Neuroscience and Brain Facts, and set up a hashtag, build your own brain cell. And here's a couple of my attempts of building brain cells with found objects around the home. And this was linked in with a webinar that we did to talk about this approach. Okay, so collage is another wonderful creative approach, and we've done lots of work creating brains, big brain collages. It's fantastic for outreach work and really promotes teamwork. And I've just put some words there that just came into my mind about what happens when you're doing this with children: sticking, talking, laughing, sharing stories. And we ask the children, once they've done their collage of a huge brain, to write some words or phrases or sentences onto different parts of the brain that have functional relation to whatever they are thinking. So prefrontal cortex, for example, personality, and telling us what your favourite ice cream is and why, and exploring. And this was a picture. This was actually what I dressed up as with Professor Wingate, who is a neuroscientist here in the centre. And it was book day. And just to say, enter into the spirit of wherever you're going, whatever communities you're working with, whatever audiences you're working with. And this was me dressed up as Professor Trelawney, is it? And he was Harry Potter. I don't know. My kids weren't very impressed, but I don't know. I didn't think we did too badly. Mad staring eyes. And here's a picture of the big brain collage. And there's something about working at scale that is really powerful with audiences. And I do quite a lot of our work in large areas, in large spaces. And this was, the biggest brain collage we could fit in the school hall. So really just to finish up is to say, that there's so many advantages of using what I've called Sci-Craft in engagement. And there's something about producing individually craft-based approaches to things and then bringing them together as a collective. That's a really powerful way of reflecting and understanding and sharing everyone's knowledge about a subject. Quite often, I've put incidental here. I shouldn't have used PowerPoint kind of design mode, but incidental, it shouldn't be like a hazardous signal, but there's so many incidental conversations that come through using crafts and creating space. Again, I shouldn't have used PowerPoint because that's not going into space. This is more like ethereal space to have conversations and to open safe spaces, like Jess was saying, about the subjects, but about other things. It speaks really loudly to well-being as well, which is, really, really important with our young people and with all audiences at the moment. Sharing and craft is in the doing. So getting stuck in and using your hands, the tactile experience, and producing something beautiful and learning new skills as well. Sci-Craft is amazing like that. And I should just say there is, I guess, a slight difference. And maybe this is a topic for another session, but, Sci-Craft versus Sci-Art, how those two things interface. And it's a bit of a blurry line, really. Yeah, that's maybe a topic for another conversation and discussion. Okay, guys. So yeah, thank you for listening, and really happy to answer any questions and to have a discussion about all this fun stuff. Thanks for that.
Well, Leigh, thank you so much for that talk. It was really great. So I'm going to open this up to questions, and I'm going to start with the ones in the chat, which I think we can all see. And I can read them out, but if any of the question askers want to put their mic up and kind of add further kind of follow-ups or anything like that, please feel free to do so. And if you haven't got a question, if you have got a question that you haven't put in the chat, you can put your hand up and we'll come to you to kind of read it out, or type it into the chat if you're feeling shy or your throat feels sore. So the first question was from James. Actually, that is the right way around it's doing it, because they could both be the name. Yes, that's the way around they're doing it. James, it would be really interesting to know how you recruited participants. Jess, I think that was during your session, perhaps talking about one of your projects.
Do you mean participants as in audience, or do you mean participants as in researchers to get them involved?
I'm guessing because it's quite early in your talk, it might have been about getting other researchers involved. Sure.
So essentially it was an email call out and chatting to researchers and saying, I'm thinking of doing this project, would you be interested? And because we ran it multiple times, it was a frequent call out of who would like to take part at the next time. And sometimes it meant that researchers were present where it wasn't their research image that was being embroidered, but it was still opened up the conversation to be able to talk about their research as well, because it's all relevant and something that was coming from the centre. So it was kind of like a flagship ongoing activity or event that happened regularly. I think since 2018, so a long time.
It was nice. Yeah. And Leigh, do you have similar experience? So how do you recruit the kind of research participants to your projects?
Yeah, I think so it varies actually. So depending on how large the project is, there'll be, I'll put an open call out, and then those people that want to get involved with the project, they can get back to us. And it's really nice to involve them right from the start, so they're involved with the devising of what they're going to be doing. So that's really powerful. But also quite often people will approach and want to reach audiences and do their public engagement, and then we'll start from scratch. So the Brainwaves one, for example, that's a project that Professor John Clark in our centre wanted to do, to reach out to audiences, and that was a Wellcome Trust funded, and then everyone in this lab joined in with that, and then the two adjacent labs who also heard about it also came down and did it. So that was a bit of a word of mouth as well. And then the following 2 years we did the same thing involving different PhD students, and it becomes a bit of a institution.
Yeah, great. The next question is from Batala, and says, could you did you have any issues with any of these projects kind of getting ethics approval, either with the methods for what you did or for the images?
No, not from my perspective. I think the only kind of ethics approval I can think of is the talking about embryonic stem cells, but we were really clear in terms of ensuring that the researchers explained the ethics behind the use of embryonic stem cells, and the process that allows people to work with them, and that it's really regimented. Just to kind of, and that was one of the things as well on our quiz or on our feedback forms was, has your opinion of stem cell research changed following the session? And a lot responded saying yes, they understood it more and they were more happy with what was being done, whereas before it was a kind of bit of a murky subject and thought that there was like, you know, things being grown in labs that, you know, that are bizarre. And so yeah, in terms of ethics, nothing needed to be approved for the actual engagement process, but ethics of stem cells did come up as a conversation that people were interested in discussing.
And Leigh, especially potentially with the mental health topics, anything like that, was there?
Yeah, so no, but what we did seek is guidance from the, I guess, the leaders of the groups that we were working with, especially for the in-depth interaction with the autistic special needs school. So that was a project that was a long time in the making in terms of the foundational basis for what we needed to know about the boys before we met them. So
right.
There was, you know, a month or 2 months where we sent some video messages. They got to know us via online first before we turned up at school, and we've just been really sensitive to those kind of needs. And I'm just looking down. I mean, this is kind of related to, I think it's one of the questions, Mary's question about triggering unpleasant emotions and bad memories. And I think it's something that you have to be super sensitive to when, you know, say, for example, our online exploration of emotions, it has the potential to be really powerful, to bring things up. So just to say to those participants, here's the support network. Please do talk to us afterwards, and to offer that out for triggers, and just to be ready for that in a really prepared way.
Just to add on to Leigh, what Leigh's saying there, I know that personally that hasn't come up in any of our sessions, but I know that in patient groups where people are talking about really sensitive and triggering topics, some events have like a mental health and a well-being space that people can leave the conversation and go to someone that's mental health first aider trained. So if you kind of have those support systems in place, in case someone does feel, you know, overwhelmed or have a specific reaction to something, it's definitely something to think about to have in place if it's something that's going to bring out emotions.
Really helpful answers. I realize now that I have it's showing the people from SGUL's names the right way around and external people the other way around. Anyway, whatever. So if I've garbled your name, I'm sorry. As somebody with a frequently garbled name. So Emily has asked a question that's got 3 thumbs up, which is asking about how you find and recruit professional. So yeah, doing arts and crafts collaborations. How are you finding your artists?
So essentially, there's various methods. Sometimes it's been through already established links and kind of, so for example, the King's Culture Department, they can help you source artists. So I don't know what kind of, if there's anything set up like that at St George's, but I know that sometimes you can have like a list of people that have said that they would be interested in doing science collaborations. So speak to your public engagement person, they'll have links of me. Some of the examples that I've used, it's actually friends of friends, and I've just said, does anybody know any artists that would be interested in doing this? I'm actually on a lino cutting course at the moment, and I got chatting to one of those artists, and they said, yeah, let's go for a lunch meeting. So it is you know, a question of just putting the feelers out there, finding them. There's no wrong way or right way. It's just making connections with people, and artists are very kind of, you know, exploratory. So it just reach out and say hi.
Yeah, just quickly from the St George's perspective, Emily, if you get in touch with Carol or me, we have some artists we're in touch with, especially who kind of operate in the Tooting market area as well. So there's even already kind of a community collaboration there as well. Leigh, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, the only other thing I was thinking about forging artist links is to kind of contact those institutions where artists are at work. You know, the Royal College of Art, we have a really nice collaborative relationship with, and the textiles course and the fine art courses, and you know, paper artists, and you know, you wouldn't need to look very far if you wanted to work with students or teachers from those places. So you just have to reach out, and you get some really interesting responses.
Yeah, that is a slight tricky thing about St George's, is that we are only a medical university. There's no art students here, but we obviously have ties with other local institutions who we could also tie with too. One final question in the chat, is from June, and asking, did you have many professional or admin or technical staff join in these sessions?
So we did actually have one day which was called it was like a King's Award, and they were celebrating staff and jobs across, and they were hosting a week worth of activities where you could come and do lab tours or tours of people's environments. So that one was kind of, we did the embroidery session with them. So it was people from, you know, non-scientific roles that were coming around and exploring as well. So it's definitely worth doing engagement with non-specialist staff, non-scientist staff, because yeah, they're audiences that want to be engaged in this subject as well. And so yeah, I would recommend doing that too, but you can put a call out to any networks that maybe, you know, HR groups or service groups as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jess. I think that also just using opportunities where entire teams come together. So like we have an away day every year, and I make sure I get a couple of hours slot in there so that professional service staff, technical staff, everyone that's involved in a research centre and offer is getting engaged with these kind of approaches. And I think it's it's a whole team effort, so everyone needs to be involved just from that perspective, as well as kind of outside of your institution or department, and everyone always really loves it and enjoys it, so it's great.
Great. So over in the hands up section, we have one hand up from Ugochi. Do you want to put your mic live and ask your question?
Yeah. Hello. Sorry, I don't know how relevant this will be, but I happen to know of a group of moms. They've got autistic children, and they came together, and one of them actually set up something like a charity where they come together to discuss their challenges and things like that. And while Leigh was talking, I was thinking that it would be great if they have an avenue to link with you when you have one of these engagements. And I was wondering, how would they be able to do that if they wanted to? Because I know that they are unaware of research, maybe observational research and things like that, that could help them in their knowledge and also help the kids. And when they come from this when it's exceptionally maybe in where parents are maybe not so knowledgeable, such things would really help them and help the children. So how can they get such opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. You can contact me. That would be one start, 100% for sure, because it's about bringing our researchers who are researching autism and molecular basis of autism, together with these audiences and with people with lived experience of the symptoms and the disorders. So I hate the word disorders, but my whole centre's called disorder, but I shouldn't say I hate it, but I do hate it. But the conditions. There's opportunities, and I can certainly point you in the direction of larger other research centres that have outreach with people with lived experience as well. So just drop me a line.
That would be great. I think they'll be excited when I tell them that.
Yeah.
That would be great. Just can I have your email?
Yes, you can. I'll put it in the chat, but I think Matt's going to send around some deets afterwards, so I'll put it here anyway, just in case.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's 2 minutes left, so we probably have time for a very quick question. There are any more hands? But if not, One from Carol. Yes, Carol, please take it away.
Hi there. Hello. Thanks very much for the great talks. And I was just wondering, from the evaluations that you did afterwards, did you see did the researchers give any indication of how it really benefited their research for the future in terms of the interactions and the engagement and involvement work they had carried out?
So from the Stich and Stem conversations, a lot of because the stem cell research is quite basic, so it's not that translational, but from their perspective, it really kind of opened their eyes up to the relevance of their research and eventually becoming translational. So I think that kind of gave a bit more inspiration for them to consider the patient side. And obviously everybody goes into science with that initially, but I think sometimes that can get lost when you're in the lab all the time and having that distance between clinicians and the lab space. So I think that really kind of almost sometimes brings them down to remember what they're doing it for. So that's been a kind of common response for that. Yeah, I'd had another example, but I'll let Leigh go first, and I'll come back to that one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jess. I think that it's bridging that gap, and maybe some researchers go into researching, say, epilepsy for, and they have a real drive for it, but then because of the nature of the work, you do get so far removed from what the impacts and the lived experience of those people with that condition are feeling. And almost without fail, researchers who have been in contact and interacted with patient groups or other people with lived experience groups, they invariably say, you know what, I'm so glad I did that. It just really reminds me, it's a total, and also it makes them look at their research in a totally different way. Like, you know, I didn't realise that was an issue if you suffered from autism or if you had ADHD, you know, I hadn't thought about that. And maybe there's a way that I can, you know, take that back through my research. And so it's a reflective process, I think, a really powerful one.
Sure. I just remembered the other example that I was going to give. One other benefit as well, or kind of impact that researchers had was when they were partnered with artists, and they did like a little swap of what techniques they used, and they really realized that the lab techniques were really similar to some of the artist techniques. So, for example, like screen printing and fluorescent labeling, they're like, oh yeah, you do all these layers to make a final picture of something. And so there was kind of like a really nice conversation about, well, how do you do it and how do you improve this? So it actually not only opinions and inspiration to kind of motivate on their subject, but also reflect on techniques and how they can be changed and improved as well.
That's really cool. But yeah,
That's really cool.
Yeah. I think we should wrap it up there. I mean, obviously we could have made this a whole afternoon session, but as it is, busy days, busy lives. There's lots of comments for Jess and Leigh in the chat saying thank you and how much everyone appreciated this talk. But I want to kind of echo that out loud and say that this has been really informative and really great. Just a quick announcement to everyone sticking around in the session. I am going to email everyone who signed up with the kind of recording link of this Teams call. I hope that works for external people. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll host it on YouTube or somewhere easy to see. And we will send around everyone's slides as well, which will include links that you can click and go find funding and examples of all these projects. But yes, thank you so much one last time to Jess and Leigh for really great talks. Really appreciated. And yeah, I will be in touch with everyone from St. George's about what next month's session will be. And yes, I look forward to seeing the outcomes of everyone's art and science collaborative projects that you all have come up with having attended today's session. Please keep us posted. But yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.